What's going on, everybody? Thank you for tuning in to another edition of Cutting the Red Tape. I do have a special guest with me here today who's going to explain her story and why she is assisting veterans. And we'll jump into that. But before we do, please do me a favor, everybody. Please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. We're definitely trying to get to 1,000 subscribers. So we have a permanent funding source to be able to assist veterans and service members out there in the emergency assistance that we do. So without further ado, I will let my guest introduce herself. Go ahead.
Hi, everybody. My name is Karie Warfield. I am super excited to be here with Marcus today. We've worked together quite a bit over the past few years, and I actually work in a number of different areas that I'm sure we'll get into in the veteran space. But I'm super excited to be here this morning.
Awesome. Awesome. All right, Karie. So if you can kind of rewind the hands of time and kind of take us back to kind of what got you into volunteering and specifically assisting veterans, because obviously you are not a veteran, but obviously you are kind of in the space of helping veterans. So kind of rewind the hands of time, take us back to, how you got into doing this.
Of course, of course. So way back in the day when I was super young, we were looking around 20 years old, I got married to my high school sweetheart, and he went Army, and we were married, had 2 kids, and like a lot of super new military, we struggled with finances, and we struggled with being a family of 4 living on a PFC's income.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And we got out to our first duty station as a married couple out in Fort Carson, and our car died like right after we got out there, and everything was just a mess. I had
Downhill.
exactly 2 young kids. I felt like I had no support system, and there's a lot of people that can relate to that as a military spouse. You sign on for that, sure. Like I was ready to be there and support my husband, and what people don't realize is that mental mindset piece that you have to be somebody who is young with kids in a different state without your support systems, and trying to make things work as a family. So Chris was my service husband. And so we struggled. We did. We had a lot of arguments, and it didn't help. He was deployed all the time, like right from the get-go. He was infantry. And so pretty soon after that, we started to have marital issues, arguing about a lot of things, mostly finances. And it wasn't good for either of our mental health. And we actually ended up getting divorced.
Gotcha.
And shortly after that, we still did everything together. We talked, with the kids together, and we went through this whole great big, should we get remarried? Should we just wait it out? Like, it was a whole lot of, the love was still there. We were just having trouble trying to figure out that military space.
Right.
And so he started getting deployed to Iraq. And we had decided on in between his 3rd and 4th tour, he ended up with a case of those sand fleas that I'm sure
yes.
we're familiar with. He was over
Yes.
at Walter Reed. And he was like, no, I have to get back to my team. I have to get back to my people. And they were like, you don't have to go over again. He was like, I do. I have to go over again. And he was due to get out in November of 2006. So in October of 2006, because he was over there, it was a little bit before that. It was September of 2006. We had a discussion, and I was like, hey, this is crazy. You're getting out in November. We can make this work. Let's just get remarried. Let's figure it out. And he was like, all right, let's talk about that, right? Let's see where that goes. Let me get done with this, figure out what I'm going to do in the civilian life, and we'll go from there.
Right.
So in October, I got the call that nobody wants to get. And his mother called me and said, Chris is gone.
Gosh.
And even though it wasn't from officers at my door, it was still the hardest call I've ever gotten.
Absolutely.
Hardest call I've ever gotten in my life. And she said, you know, because of the kids and everything, you'll have a CAC officer at your door in the morning. And I said, okay. You know, I mean, I said, okay, after a whole lot of screaming, you know,
Absolutely.
that's, you know, it takes a while for it to set in, you know. And then on top of that, because his mom knew how close we were and had always been, she was like, I'm just going to tell them to send everything to you. And so they did. Footlocker upon footlocker from, you know, from his belongings all showed up. Had a CAC officer. They, you know, we went out for his funeral, and I was angry, Marcus. I was angry because I didn't have the opportunity to be his wife again, and because I didn't have the opportunity for the kids to grow up with their dad, and because I was angry a little bit at him because he had insisted, even after, you know, things had gotten bad. Like, he had terrible stories to tell when he was back with his sand fleas, you know.
Right.
And I felt horrible, but I understood his drive because that's where he wanted to be, right? He wanted to be over there with his buddies, which I understand now, right? But it was definitely something hard to move through. And I'm sorry, my story is so long. So it kind of,
Continue, please. No, it's fine. It's fine.
it went over, you know, we're at the funeral, and his mom says, hey, you know, I want Father Steve to come over and talk to you. And I was like, okay. Father Steve is the one that married us, right? So she's like, I want him to talk to you. And I was like, okay. And he came over and he said, hey, family wants you to know, like, this is permanent. It's going to be okay for you to move on and for you to, you know, move forward. And meanwhile, you know, his mom's over there telling everybody this is his wife, you know, because that was the relationship that we had.
Right.
And so it's very difficult because now I operate in the Gold Star family space, but I'm not considered by military standards to be a Gold Star wife.
Is that because you guys weren't married at the time?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And so, like I said, there was anger, right? So I was really angry, and especially as I started to look for areas in which to volunteer, right? Because I'm looking for ways to volunteer in the mental health space because that was my passion. Like, I had to learn how to have a different mindset in life so that I just didn't sit in my house and be depressed with 2 kids. Like, it was hard. And so I had to get in the right mindset to get out there and to put myself out there and to continue to serve as he would have wanted me to do. And so that's when I started looking for volunteer opportunities in the veteran space.
So how long was the time frame as far as when like the funeral happened to you getting in that mindset of getting out there? How long was that time frame?
It was a long time, actually. It was at least it was about 5 years before I started looking for those volunteer opportunities. To be honest, a lot of that was because the kids were still super young. So I was a single mom trying to figure out, you know, the kids were 9 and 11 when Chris passed. And so, and they were going through things, right? Like, my normally super happy, cheery kids were struggling. They were struggling in school, and they were struggling with relationships, and they were struggling with not having their dad, you know?
Right.
And And so when you're trying to work full time and still trying to raise the kids, things fall through the cracks.
Yeah.
Right? Like there are so many times when I wish now that I could have gone back and changed things that I had done with them, and maybe had that volunteerism that I could have brought them into so that they could have felt more comfortable in that veteran space, a little earlier. But coulda, shoulda, woulda, right?
Right.
And but it was at least 5 years before I started looking in the volunteer space.
Okay. So once you started looking, I mean, what was out there? What did you find?
Um, Not a lot in the mental health area. I found the big ones, right? Like I found Wounded Warrior Project, and I found like a smattering of other organizations that cater to veterans that have disabilities and PTSD and things like that. And I started to just kind of listen to the stories, and I was in different like forums, and I'll be honest, Marcus, I don't remember a lot of them from back then
Right.
now, but I did see something go out back then. Like Facebook was really big, right?
Right.
Like you found everything on Facebook. And so I was on Facebook one day and I saw an ad in 2017, I think it was, saying, "Hey, we need volunteers for a suicide prevention kickball tournament," right?
Okay.
And then actually, let me rewind a little bit, Marcus, because here's what happened. It was really odd for me because remember I talked about being angry.
Yeah.
I was so angry when I started to see suicide rates climb. And I was angry for the wrong reasons. I'm going to just put that out there. Like, and I know this is like a volatile subject, but I'm going to tell you, I was angry at our veterans that were dying by suicide.
Mhm.
I was angry at them because I thought, how dare you take your life when you were one of the ones who were able to come back?
Right.
And I struggled in that space. And that's why I took a lot of time before I went in to volunteer,
Right.
because I didn't understand PTS back then. I didn't understand the things that they saw, and I'll never fully understand that, right? Like as a veteran that was not deployed and did not see what our veterans see and do and struggle through, I won't understand. But at least to have the clarity of why we have so many veterans now dying by suicide. I have that piece of the puzzle now. But I was so angry. And then when I started to realize as I listened to stories, because I had to put myself again in that mindset, right? To be open, to hear what is happening? Where is that thought process? What are you processing through? Why is this such a huge epidemic, pretty much more than anything else? And I started to understand it. It took a minute. But then when I saw back in 2017 that they were looking for suicide prevention, it was a suicide prevention organization looking for volunteers for a kickball tournament for our veterans. And it married that get out into the open, find that camaraderie, like find your space in potentially the civilian world, right? All of those things were important to me. And so I jumped right on it. And that organization was Operation Shockwave.
Mhm. So, as far as you said you feel grief and maybe an unpopular opinion. One of the things I try to, I guess, internalize, when I interview, guests is different perspectives. So it's very interesting to hear your perspective is coming from a place of grief, as far as your significant other not being able to return home, and those who were returning home. It's like you thinking like, hey man, you have such a, great life ahead of you, and there are those who are not coming home. Just it's a very, very different way of looking at things. And I'm glad you were able to share that. So I appreciate that.
There's a bit of embarrassment behind that now, like to say that is not easy, but it explains the foundation of why I feel so strongly now working in the veteran space, because I understand the need now, and I understand that I was wrong.
All right. Well, I think everybody obviously handles grief in very different ways. Everybody has, very, very vast different ways on how they handle grief. So I mean, I wouldn't hold it against you too much. Obviously back then you were you're going through it. I mean, you know, so I'm not gonna hit the hammer over your head too much, something like that. Um, so as far as when you actually got into, the rhythm of, getting into this suicide prevention, what did you see? What did you find?
So I ended up staying as a volunteer with Operation Shockwave, moved to executive director, and then eventually moved to chief of operations, and stayed with Operation Shockwave for about 5 years. And the reason that I stayed there and that I worked through that was because I saw a huge need for mental health modalities that were, as we said, complementary and integrative, right? We needed to be able to give other options and alternatives that, at least back then, were not even options through the VA. And I know the VA has come a long way. There's a lot of things now that they offer that they didn't back then. And there's still a lot of room for improvement with the VA, right? But we were out there to not say, hey, maybe what you're doing is wrong. We were there to say, hey, here's some additional options for you, to be able to move down a path where you have opportunities to have different coping mechanisms, to be able to feel like you have a sense of community in areas that you may not have had before. Maybe you don't have a close circle of friends, and maybe you don't have people that understand you, but being able to have more laid back opportunities to connect to others that are like-minded, or, struggling with the same things that you are, it gives you another outlet, another vehicle.
Absolutely. That's outstanding. So how was this outreach, I guess, being administered? I mean, were you guys going out and just contacting people? Was it just through holding events? Like, how are you guys getting out there and helping vets?
Um, we started with a lot of events. Events, and events lead to word of mouth, right? And then one of the things that we were most proud of was the networking, right? Like, we
Yeah.
found the other people that were in the veteran space, and we believed in better together, right? We believed in pulling people from all different areas that are all striving for the same goal and the same purpose, to move together and toward a common goal, right? Like, if I can't help a veteran, then I'm going to give a veteran to someone else as a warm handoff to somebody who can help a veteran in that space that they need the assistance. And the reason that that was so important was because nowadays what you hear is people say, well, yeah, you can get that help by calling this number, right? Or by reaching out through this form online, or check out this website, right? And then it's overwhelming, Marcus.
Mhm.
It's overwhelming to have the issues that you have, potentially mental issues, right? And then trying to sit there, especially in a time of crisis, and navigate a website. Who's doing that?
Exactly.
No one's doing that.
All
They're
right.
reaching out to the person who told them that they know somebody, and they expect that same ability to be able to talk to the person that the other person talked to, right?
All right.
And you want to be able to foster that sense of community among multiple resources. And so that's what we were trying to build. And I do want to put in there, like, I stepped down January of this year. I did step down from Operation Shockwave. I am not affiliated with them. I think they're doing fantastic work in the veteran space, or I would have stayed with them for 5 years, right?
Right.
Um, but it was also time for me to move into other areas of the community and be able to grow that scope just a little bit more.
All right. And for those who don't know, if you haven't been to one of their events, it is definitely, network friendly. They're definitely trying to find, connect the community to different resources and, and find those right opportunities for, veterans who may be experiencing or at different stages, in their life. So I have been a part of those events, and it is definitely, hey, let's find the right resources for these veterans. So thank you for doing that. I do appreciate that, because like my organization, although we're not specifically dealing with, mental illness or substance abuse, it is nice to have those resources available and be like, hey, you know what? I actually know somebody who can help you out with that. Hey, call this number. So that's what it's all about, right?
Actually, I'm glad that you bring that up, Marcus, because that leads to what I'm doing now. So I am actually a resource coordinator for two different organizations, and that is my job. Like, I am sitting on the employee resource group, the co-chair of their heroes employee resource group. And through being the co-chair and their resource coordinator, I have an opportunity to still use a lot of those contacts and resources to be able to start moving towards, right? Like, to be able to start talking to people. Did a panel talking about how, as an ally, so not a veteran, as an ally in the workspace, that I can still support and be a part of who a support system for our veterans who are entering into civilian life after they've left the service. And so
Awesome.
it's been very rewarding there. And I also sit as the resource coordinator for the veteran committee over at Chandler Elks Lodge 2429. So it's been a very rewarding space to be in.
So for those who aren't familiar with the Elks Lodge, I know we pass them, all the time. What does the Elks Lodge do? What are they about?
So Elks Lodge is all about Americanism and working in the community with our veterans and working in the community with children. And so what we're hoping to do is to kind of foster our patriots, right? Like, so we want to support people who have already done, been out there and fought for us and done all those things in that veteran space. And so that's our, not just our veterans, but our service members as well. And then we're also trying to kind of get in there and adjust and help the mentality of our next leaders that are up and coming in the community, and showing them that they have a place and a space that they belong, and that they can be true patriots and grow up in this sense of community and foster that next growth mindset for our country.
Fantastic, fantastic. So I guess we can leave the audience with this. If you can rewind the hands of time, and for anybody who may have or may lose a spouse overseas and they're getting that phone call, what would you recommend to them?
The first thing I would recommend, Marcus, is to take the time to grieve.
Yeah.
Don't shut it down. There are plenty of people out there that are more than willing to have that conversation. And whether you are a true Gold Star spouse, or whether you are a Gold Star family, or whether you are simply, I heard time and time again, the fiancés and the people that were, had been in long-term relationships and not married, and they lose their spouse overseas. It is so much harder to sit in the civilian space and be connected to a service member that is lost. And there are others out there that feel you. Like, we know, and we are out there, and you just have to look for us when you're ready. when you're ready. But get that mental health support, get that assistance. If you're in the corporate space, a lot of those corporate companies, they have policies in place that have EAPs and they have resources for you for mental health. And if they don't, be a change maker. Go to your company and say, this is missing and we need this. And be that person that stands up and pioneers that in the corporate workspace. And even one of the people that we've worked with just most recently, Marcus, Vanguard Veterans, that's what they do, right? They go into the civilian corporations and they teach you as a corporation how to respect and hold space for your military service members and veterans that you may potentially hire in your workspace. So the resources are out there, and obviously you guys can reach out to me and Marcus, or to me through Marcus, or whatever the case may be. And I'll be more than happy to hook you up with resources that you may need.
Awesome. Thank you, Karie. I think that's needed to be heard. I'm glad you said that, because there are those out there who may not know, where to go in that moment, and who are just maybe, everything's just hitting you at once. So I appreciate you letting people know the information. I appreciate you sharing your story. I appreciate you letting people know that they are not alone and that there's assistance out there. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on here.
Absolutely. So there you have it all. Another, great story from Karie here. If you guys need the assistance that's out there, please do me a favor. Again, like, share, and subscribe to these videos. We're getting important information out there, such as this, and letting people know that they're not alone. And again, we are here to help. So with that being said, like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.